afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to see everyone here today. My name is LaCory Meadows. I'm a member of the CMC Board of Trustees, as well as the Director of OSU Extension Franklin County. It is wonderful to see you here. All right, so today's forum, the Real Franklinton, is brought to us with support from Regionomics, represented here today by founder Bill Lafayette. Thank you, Bill. Where are you, Bill? Thank you. Okay. Over the past several years, the near west side neighborhood of Franklinton has become the center of cool, with artists, entrepreneurs, and big thinkers moving in and making things happen, spanning investments, redevelopment, and a bright future. But along with the herald new dawn of Franklinton, we must not overlook the history and people who have lived there for generations. Perhaps a rising tide can indeed lift all boats. Today, we get to hear the rest of the story from those intimately involved with the Real Franklinton. Please welcome CEO of Laurel Lights Christian Health Center, Dana Vallangeon, Director of Franklinton Gardens, Nick Stanich, Executive Director of the Franklinton Board of Trade, Trent Smith, and last but not least, reporter with Business First of Columbus, Carrie Ghose. Carrie, the podium is yours.
Thank you. So we're witnessing in Columbus's oldest neighborhood a great urban experiment that's playing out before us now. If you look around, especially in that area between those big empty city-owned lots from COSI over to 315, between former car lots, a former housing project that was raised, and lots of vacant warehouses that are owned by a Los Angeles urban development company. Then with Mount Carmel West, which is going to tear down its inpatient towers, move 1,500 jobs out of Franklinton to Grove City, and thereby add to the neighborhood by opening up actually 9 acres on that Mount Carmel campus for redevelopment. And I've talked to some folks who say really a hospital doesn't really add economic activity to a neighborhood because everyone goes there and parks and stays and then leaves. Whereas if it becomes a vibrant outpatient campus, you'll have some activity there. You add all those acres up, it's 44 acres, all within 1.25 miles of Broad and High. I mean, where do you have ground up opportunity to build practically downtown real estate? And this is all happening in what's there now, which is about 8,000 residents. Only about 800 of those are in this are east of 315. 7,000 residents, and in a aging housing stock, the oldest sewers in the city and the oldest neighborhoods in the city. We've had some horrific fatal fires of late. And there's extraordinary efforts to revitalize that housing stock, 150 houses built by the Franklinton Development Association, and working to help bring up both the quality and the values of those properties. But if we're dreaming about what's going to happen with all this development, what the folks who built the Arena District own land there. The folks who built Broad and High own land there. Is it fair to say, well, when? Why is it still vacant? So that's why we have those folks here. And so that's the first question is, Lance Robbins of Urban Smart Growth started 400 West Rich, owns 7 more acres. He's ready to pull the trigger. He says, I can't convince the banks. So how do we convince the banks this is a neighborhood worth investing in?
Well, in my opinion, we are doing the convincing now by having these types of conversations and by just continuing to be the neighborhood that we are and having the types of collaborations that are present there currently with all of the different organizations between the 3 of us and the ones we run. And I'm in awe of all of the Franklinton supporters who are out here in the audience today. But just having this conversation is what's going to eventually convince the banks. because the more residents and the more businesses we get interested in the neighborhood who finally pull the trigger on their own is what's going to create that buzz with the banking institutions to go ahead and lend the big money to have the big impact. Personally, I don't know what else convincing they need, to be quite honest, but we're doing that now, and I hope that this conversation today is going to go a long way to make that happen.
As we look at the Broad Street corridor, especially in front of Mount Carmel, there's a former Graham Ford. It's about 7 acres, and it's adjoining existing parking garages. Can you imagine how much faster the Short North would have come along if they hadn't had to build the parking garages, which are about the most expensive and least return on investment part of a commercial redevelopment project? So they've got the parking garages there, and you've got things that are moving into the neighborhood. Brewdog, the Scottish brewery, is going to build its brew pub there. It's joining Land Grant, Rehab Tavern, and Strongwater. I was like singing Storm. Sorry, Strongwater. Then there's a new tattoo parlor in town. But beyond the 18 to 34 bearded demographic, what kind of what kind of other economic development and commerce would you like to see coming to that corridor and around Franklinton?
So it sounds like you're speaking more directly to East Franklinton's redevelopment. Everything.
I'll move west.
Okay. So a lot of that hub, that strong focus of economic activity is really pouring into this East Franklinton area. It's that hot new creative district, which is distinctly just different than West Franklinton. And if we're moving to that, I don't want to talk too much on that right now.
To answer your first question and then tag to the second, I think the convincing will come as those of us who love Franklinton continue to be invested in Franklinton and continue to put time, energy, and money into Franklinton. As far as what would I love to see in the Broad Street corridor, personally, I'm a Franklinton resident. I would love to see some additional restaurants and retail opportunities. I would love to see even that corridor have some mixed income housing options for houses of all incomes to have better housing options. And then we need lots of other things too, but I don't want to hog the stage. So
Yeah, that's the focus for the Board of Trade, is to attract those retail amenities that you would expect to find in the most mature neighborhood in Central Ohio that are just no longer there because of the disinvestment after the flooding and the grip of crime that had taken over Franklinton for so long. We don't have a dry cleaner, we don't have a flower shop, we don't have a bakery, we don't have those types of things that you would expect to find in a mature neighborhood. We want those things back, and that will drive more residents. That's what's needed. And I'm a resident as well, and like Dana, I would love to be able to walk to a bakery on a Saturday morning. So we want that stuff.
As you mentioned, there is Franklinton has its only 2 natural boundaries that make a circle around it, the river and 70. Bisecting that is 315. And as I said, there's 800 people over here, 6,200 over there, with a mix of very aging housing stock and the new stuff that's been built. You can't build a cap over, 315 is a raised, it's a great wall. So how do you get the economic activity and the spin-off businesses from Columbus Idea Foundry and the community health initiatives at Mount Carmel connected to the folks who live in those houses on the other side of the freeway?
Well, Mount Carmel in particular is doing a great job with their Healthy Living Center of doing that outreach with the residents. They've started programs there that started off with 5 to 10 people attending these healthy cooking classes, and they're up to 60, 70 participants at this point. And so the outreach from that campus has been pretty significant. And then you look at organizations like Gladden Community House and what all the different things that Lower Lights has going on. I think that the outreach is there. It's just I think it's just continuing that and gaining the residents' confidence that this is not a flash in the pan, that these people that are trying to drive this development are not going to go away after the next big thing gets built. I'm as committed as Dana is, and as much as anybody else that is a resident and a business owner and a supporter of Franklinton. So I think the outreach is significant, and I don't think enough people recognize that.
I think some of the economic and business development that has happened on the east side of Franklinton has kind of the catalytic and synergistic opportunity to actually bring both interest and attention and kind of good energy, so to speak, to be carried forward into additional work that needs to be done on the west side of Franklinton.
And then more voice from multi-generational residents in a lot of the initiatives that are driven by nonprofit agencies in Franklinton. A lot of the activity is newer individuals who have identified opportunity for redevelopment in the neighborhood, and for whatever reason, there hasn't been a strong representation of individuals who have families or multiple generations that have interest in the neighborhood. So making sure they're heard is important, and making sure there's some sort of training or infrastructure so individuals understand how to be heard is a big deal.
We had a forum here late last year on housing as a prescription for good health. And so you're seeing that play out there. You've got FTA, there's an Athens nonprofit that's starting to establish a presence in Columbus that builds affordable housing. There's the big housing coalition that was announced at that event. Is it moving fast enough to redevelop the housing stock there? And how do we keep from pushing out that there's a large contingent of that neighborhood that have lived in their houses for generations? How do we keep raising property values from pushing people out?
I think that is really a hard question to balance, but I think the dream, at least my dream, is to see a Franklinton that really is inclusive and has options that allow everyone who wishes to be part of the new Franklinton, be part of the new Franklinton. For me, the answer that you were directly asking, is it moving fast enough? Some days it feels fast, other days it feels agonizingly slow. Having friends and neighbors and patients and folks who are living in deplorable conditions never makes it feel fast enough. To have folks who really don't have running water, don't have a washer and dryer, don't have finished walls, don't have the conditions that most of us in this country take for granted, is unjust. And so, my answer is no, it's not fast enough.
It's also a big food desert, which, 2 acres of gardens, and I know Lower Lights is planning a nonprofit grocery store, because there aren't any. How do you convince, say, an Aldi or, someone to join with you to feed people there?
We have an Aldi really close by, just on the south side of 70, but access is kind of tough.
Right.
If you don't have a car, it's not the most convenient space to walk to. And I think the West Franklinton plan lays out some really good numbers, and I think one of those numbers is that 33% of the households maybe don't have access to an automobile. So if you've got, I think they say the population is around 9,000 in the West Franklinton plan, but if you've got 3,000 or so individuals who don't have access to an automobile, how do you ensure they can get to a store to get healthy produce? How do you ensure they have money to both spend on transportation or the time to take a bus over to German Village or up to the new Giant Eagle Market District on 3rd? It's tough. So relocating centrally is good, but also building out better transportation infrastructure so people can get to the existing stores is important.
Carrie, I'd like to touch on one point real quickly. Talking about how do we include the current residents of Franklinton in the development and in the success. There's an example of a program that's been started called Franklinton Rising, and it is a housing program that will teach young adults in Franklinton skilled trades. to be able to, their model is that they will buy a house that's dilapidated and or get one donated. I know that they have about 4 in their possession right now. 2 were donated, 2 were purchased at a very low price. And they have relationships with these contractors who will go in and do the remodeling work or the rehab work, and all the while they're teaching these 17, 18, 19-year-old kids how to do that stuff. And so at the end of this program, these kids now have a marketable trade where they can get a good paying job and eventually rent that house that they've fixed up, and hopefully the ultimate goal is to have them buy that house. So that's one of the most poignant efforts that I'm aware of right now to keep residents within the neighborhood and not push them away. Clearly more jobs are needed, clearly more living wage jobs are needed in that neighborhood, but this is one of the best examples of a situation where we're trying to make that person part of the solution while giving them the opportunity to have a good paying job.
Some more numbers about the difficulty with revitalizing housing stock without pushing out existing residents. The West Franklinton plan, again, I'll cite this a number of times. I think it says that about 75% of the residents of Franklinton rent. They don't own. And the residents of Franklinton are, income breakdown, I think it's about 44% of the households make less than $15,000 a year. It's excruciatingly poor. Another 22% make less than 25, I think. So you've got 66% of the households in Franklinton making less than $25,000 a year. Couple that with what it costs to rent. I don't know for certain, but maybe $650 a month, roughly. That's pushing you past the 30% of your income that you're spending on housing, and most of the neighborhood is housing insecure, if that's how you're sort of calculating housing security within our neighborhood. So if you fix houses, you've got to raise rent. Typically, that's how the market generally works. So unless you have agencies that are subsidizing a lot of housing redevelopment in the neighborhood, it's going to be really hard to see a housing stock revitalized, a housing stock that's largely decrepit. I mean, 100 years of, or not 100, but decades of exclusion from FHA money and insurance has really resulted in a lot of the houses falling to substandard conditions. It's just going to require a lot of nonprofit, city, federal support to ensure that houses do remain affordable when they're brought up to a good condition.
I don't know if you know, or if you've heard that all 3 of our panelists live in Franklinton. And I had done some, I don't know if are you all west, in the western part?
Yeah.
Okay. I had done some research for a story on looking just at those 800 people in East Franklinton. And from the time of 2010, before the effort to create a concerted arts district, to 2013, went from 0% of residents with a college degree or higher to 6.6% of residents, 6.6% of 800, but still, it's attracting people who are professionals to the neighborhood. But one of the biggest barriers, you look at beautiful houses listed there, gorgeous woodwork, modern kitchen, it's $80,000. There's still the perception often of crime, even though since the tear down of the public housing project, moving of the open shelter, violent crime isn't as much of a problem in the neighborhood. I know that tattoo parlor said right before they opened, someone kicked in the door and came in and stole an iPad. It's that kind of property crime. But how do you convince people who want to develop or buy houses, people who want to develop or open a store, it's not the scary place you remember?
Well, one thing that I'll talk about that we do to try to help address this is we have a long-standing partnership with Keep Columbus Beautiful, which is an organization through the City of Columbus that really helps neighborhoods with litter abatement and graffiti abatement and beautification and just in general making the neighborhood look better. And it's no secret that the presence of litter is going to be an attraction to crime. When somebody sees that it's a trashy street, well, why won't they commit a crime on that street? So it's a grassroots effort to try to get neighbors and volunteers and organizations involved to just simply clean the neighborhood up. That's why those petty crimes are able to happen and flourish, is because we have done a lot, but we haven't done enough yet to really completely address that issue. And, the broken window theory, I mean, it's almost a cliche at this point, but, we've got to just simply clean it up. And we hope that this partnership with Keep Columbus Beautiful will only get stronger, and the beautification continues to happen to make people want to come down and take a look at the neighborhood.
Opportunistic crime is really common. It's petty crime. It's someone steals a drill, someone breaks in and steals a computer, that kind of a thing. It can be prevented if you are present, and if you make sure that you maintain a strong presence, you're showcasing that you're maintaining a property, and also if you take some small precautions like getting a surveillance system or a security system, it found that it drops off entirely. So vacancy is what brings it on.
Dealing with vacant houses was where I was going to go, but also in the 8 years or 9 years that my family has lived on our street, we have seen a continual kind of increase in the number of kind of what I would consider stable houses, meaning either houses that are now owned that didn't used to be, or houses even where there's a renter, but the renter is a longer term renter. And honestly, there's beginning to be a sense of kind of like in the suburbs where I came from, and that's not even necessarily always true, but our suburban experience was truly a community and a neighborhood, and we all socialized together and we all knew each other, and that is really beginning to occur on our street.
Absolutely.
Dr. Dana, you mentioned, some big barriers as far as running water and the basic needs of life, but you've got some pretty big healthcare organizations who are collaborating, Lower Lights and Mount Carmel. What are some community health initiatives? And, now you've got the urban gardens too, who are, food is part of health too. What are some collaborative community health initiatives that you dream of or that are already brewing?
Sure. So let me talk to some of the what's already occurred. I do believe that over the last 14 years, there has been a great effort of folks working together around improving the health of the neighborhood in the whole, but also at an individual patient level. There are initiatives with Mount Carmel and Lower Lights where we basically try to coordinate care across both systems, from the hospital or the ER to the outpatient setting. There is an initiative that was piloted a couple years ago where one of our staff members, a Lower Lights staff member, basically works 11 to 7 in the Mount Carmel West ER, and every patient who comes in the ER during those hours who doesn't have a primary care provider, whether they're insured or not, sees our employee for the purpose of talking about why it's important to have a medical home and a regular place of care, and to get linked, whether it's Lower Lights or somewhere else. And so I think there have been a lot of great already occurring collaborations and efforts to work on the overall health and health outcomes of the neighborhood. Going forward, I think that a couple of the larger ones that will impact hopefully the community and the health of the community the greatest are if we really can establish a grocery store that is affordable and accessible to residents, whether they live in the neighborhood or are coming through the neighborhood, and regardless of income, so that more affordable, healthier, regular food can be available. As a provider, we see all the time the effects of social determinants of health actually having a much larger impact on someone's hemoglobin A1C or blood pressure than the medicine they're taking or not taking, or some of those more clinical scientific things. And so where we can impact that social determinants from a collaboration and a collective effort, that'll make a big impact. I think the other is the possibility of continued collaborative efforts around just health and wellness and opportunities for the community to have safe places to exercise and attractive places to exercise and work out.
Just watching property sales in the neighborhood, so with Columbus Idea Foundry finishing its renovation, it's going to be bringing in a lot of corporate folks will be on that campus, and then Mount Carmel pledging to invest $46 million on its campus in redevelopment. I'm noticing parcels immediately adjoining the hospital are being bought for pretty large sums. So Trent, what can you say without ruining something that of some economic development that we might be seeing in the near term instead of maybe someday?
One of the things that we would like to see come back is an event space for Franklinton. When Vets Memorial got torn down, that took away an event space that was a lucrative business for, Tommy's Diner and the Florentine and Phillips Coney Island and those types of places. We would like to see development on Broad Street that is going to accommodate an event space. And there are a couple of different ideas that are floating around that could make that happen. Nothing that's concrete enough or far enough down the road to be able to really, talk specifics. But that's something that's important to the business community. And I'm going to take this opportunity to just throw this in there as well. Nick has referenced the West Franklinton plan several times. One thing that has to happen on Broad Street to be able to allow retail to flourish, whether it's at the Mount Carmel reimagining of their campus or wherever we're talking about, we've got to slow down traffic. We have to do it, and that's a part of the West Franklinton plan that was talked about at quite a lot of length. That's a 30-mile-an-hour road. You would never know that by standing on Broad Street watching cars go by. Everybody goes at least, you're right, 55, 60 miles an hour. That is a death sentence for retail. You just can't have it. And so whether it's medians or bump outs at the intersections or whatever, we've got to be creative and make that work and make that happen. And it needs to happen in the near future, not the distant.
You were mentioning property value increase, and it's a very real thing right now in Franklinton. The organization that I direct, Franklinton Gardens, we're very concerned about property value increasing to a point where housing is going to be a really lucrative thing again. So our efforts to build a foodscape in the neighborhood through bio-intensive fruit and vegetable production might be compromised if that happens. So we've been trying to buy a number of properties as an organization to ensure that we have a stable, permanent footprint in Franklinton to showcase the model of farming that we're providing. But just that area that you mentioned right by the hospital and right around 315, property values really increased substantially. There was an auction I was paying attention to a few months ago. Vacant house went for $65 over on Skidmore in East Franklinton. That probably would have gone for $5,000 5 years ago. So it was a dramatic increase in property value in certain areas, especially associated with East Franklinton, and a little more gradual increase in West Franklinton, but it's happening.
So we're getting close to audience questions, but wanted to throw this one out to you. How much of the change would you say is incremental? How much is disruptive? And which model do you prefer?
It's kind of hard to argue that some change is disruptive when you are seeing change happen in a neighborhood that has been so racked with poverty and sort of disinvestment for years. This is kind of a tough question. So making sure that housing is not displacing individuals.
Perhaps disruptive increments?
Yes.
That'd be good.
I would combine the two.
Yeah.
That's the right answer.
So something.
Incrementally disruptive.
Yeah. But kind of along that line, something that we cannot lose sight of is the history of Franklinton. There is so much history there. It would take days to really describe it all. And the Franklinton Historical Society is a tremendous organization that really tries to preserve that. And the Harrison House on Broad Street is one of the primary examples of how they tell that story. And so I'm personally very hopeful, just as a resident and as an organization leader, that they can get control of the Harrison House so that it's theirs to use as they see fit to be able to tell the story that needs to be told about Franklinton. Because there's a lot of change coming, but there's no reason to lose sight of what brought us to that neighborhood in the first place. And there's a lot of stories there to be told.
Before I throw it to the audience, is there something you wish I'd asked? A piece you'd like to get out to this audience that haven't had a chance?
I would just say that for me, it has been a true both personal journey and just a journey for my family, having the privilege and opportunity for our lives to intersect and be connected with Franklinton and many of the folks in Franklinton. And my life has been so much enriched by it. And thanks for the opportunity to share a bit today.
Along the same lines as Dana, I moved down to Franklinton in 2010 as a grad student at OSU, just looking for affordable housing and try out some rehab work and to grow food in my yard. And there's so much opportunity for positive influence in the development sort of trajectory in Franklinton that has been a real exciting accident for me to be involved down here full time.
The thing that encourages me the most, and I'll make this quick, but Franklinton is really all about relationships, and Dana kind of alluded to it. There's someone here in the audience today that came up to me, and I had given them some contact information for some help with law enforcement on some issues they were having, and just the outreach that took place by making that connection, brought him a long way into solving his problems, and I think the word that best describes Franklinton at this point in time is collaboration. There's just a large number of organizations all working towards the same goal, and we talk about it. We disagree sometimes, but we talk about it. And at the end of the day, we get a decision made, and we're all looking towards that same opportunity for everyone to stay and to move in and just to make Franklinton what it needs to be.
I know kind of like put him on the spot, but I know Andy Boyes here. He runs a lot of charter schools in town and has open K through 8 in Franklinton. So if we're talking about housing values, what's the difference between a beautiful century-old house in Franklinton and one in Clintonville or Grandview Heights? People know they have, they don't have to send their kids to, a private school to live there. Beyond that charter school, what do you see as educational needs for the community that would make it a full family-friendly area?
Well, the Franklinton Preparatory Academy, they did two things. First of all, they brought a well-run charter school to the neighborhood for high school students, and they also rehabbed a beautiful old building at 40 Chicago Avenue. So they brought in Youth for Christ is actually the organization that did the renovation. They spent $5 million on a building to be able to educate Franklinton students, and that school was what spurred Franklinton Rising. So that is a great example of the type of educational opportunities that the neighborhood needs, and as well as what Andy Boy is doing and others in the neighborhood. I mean, it's just, not everyone is college bound. I think we've all learned that lesson over the course of the last, couple of decades, and we need to make sure that those students have the opportunity to get skilled trades in, whatever other opportunities or interests they have, whether it's the arts community or whatever. Everything is there. You can pretty much touch any type of a profession that you want to right now in Franklinton with what's on the east side. We've just got to connect it to the west side and do a little better, more urgent job of it.
I would echo that, as well as just reminding us that there also needs to be increased job training and educational opportunities for adults as well.
Okie dokie. It is Metro Club's tradition to take audience questions, so please, there's a microphone up here. You can step up, and when you do, please state your name, ask your question, and we thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments like your moderator. Let's proceed with the first question.
Hi, I'll try to avoid the editorial. So many questions. Andy Campbell, thanks for being here today. We haven't heard a whole lot about this, but I understand Franklinton and the folks that live there were very supportive of the redevelopment of the Cooper Stadium site. And I'm wondering what you're hearing, at the street level about what's going on there. It seems to be taking an awful long time. I know there's great promise potentially. So what's the word on the street in Franklinton?
Well, this is the third summer that is going to start. So this is the third summer now that it's going to start this summer. But they had delays, just like any big project that's going to spend $40 million to really redevelop a site. They've had those types of delays. The last update that I've heard, and this was something that I think that Commissioner John O'Grady would agree with is that it will indeed happen this summer. That they have kind of gotten over all the hurdles, all of the financials, all of the site plans, and we should expect to see dust flying over there this summer.
I think there's a lot of mixed opinion about that track. It was pretty quickly pushed through council, it seemed, when that was the hot item of discussion a few years ago. But there's a lot of concern about the noise pollution that might come into the neighborhood, how that might affect perception. Certainly a lot of optimism about jobs coming into the neighborhood. I'm not sure what kind of jobs will come in for it. I don't know if that's really been discussed at depth. Spin-off development around Mound could be a really positive thing, possibly economically.
Yeah, my name is Kermit Whitfield. I've heard it commented several times since the Scioto Greenway has been completed that brings Franklinton closer to downtown, and people seem to be excited about that possibility. I was wondering if you could speak to what you think the impact of the Greenway is going to be on Franklinton, both short-term and long-term.
Well, I think it just creates an appropriate gateway for people to be introduced to Franklinton. There were all kinds of snarky jokes going around when the bridges were being built that it was a bridge to nowhere. Well, it's absolutely a bridge to somewhere now. And we're pretty proud of that fact that we were able to, take those cynical remarks and put something there that's worth crossing the bridge for. Now, getting over the boundary of 315 to bring that farther west, that's the challenge that we're facing right now. East Franklinton is, I kind of, say, in my opinion, is sort of on autopilot right now. I mean, everybody wants to be there, and it's just a matter of getting that energy to cross 315. But certainly the Scioto Greenway is just a beautiful addition to what is the front door of Franklinton. And I would hope that would encourage people to come down and check it out and come farther west. Don't stop at rehab and leave it at that. Come on west. Check it out. Give me a call. I'll take you out and have a beer with you in West Franklinton.
There's a cascading effect of interest moving westward. A lot of individuals, younger individuals, I think, have a lot more interest in moving into Franklinton or West Franklinton. And it also provides a lot of nice amenity for kids and youth from West Franklinton to go experience. There's not a whole lot of great recreational opportunity in regard to parks and that kind of a thing in Franklinton, so it's a really nice asset.
My name is Carol Looper, and my question involves gentrification. I remember the Short North, and I remember German Village, when people really didn't want to live there in the residential areas. What about the residential areas of Franklinton? Both German Village and the Short North have residences that have become really out of reach for the people who lived there back then. Does it look like you might have that kind of exceptional interest where things will be rebuilt, remodeled, gentrified, if you will, and become out of reach?
I'm by no means the expert on this topic, but my short answer is I hope not. The longer answer is that I do believe that the housing stock in Franklinton isn't exactly the same housing stock as in those two neighborhoods. And so that in itself, from just a literal and practical sense, makes it a little less likely for it to regentrify to the degree that those neighborhoods have.
Yeah, I agree. The housing stock's a bottleneck for that in a way. Middle-income housing stock built in the late 1800s, early 1900s was not that fine of construction, whereas German Village, while it was middle income, the craftsmanship was great. Same with the Victorian Village in the Short North. Gentrification and the disruptive change that it brings, again, in a neighborhood that's already towing the line on housing insecurity and housing instability, any increase in neighborhood, just household income, like that brings with it gentrification by definition. So I only think Franklinton has that way to go. It's how we kind of classify gentrification and talk about its impacts and what it is. That's the really important discussion. So making sure it's not displacing an entire neighborhood because you've got a lot of other individuals who want to re-urbanize according to some national trends. That's important.
And I think what makes us different from those neighborhoods as well is that we're actively talking about not wanting gentrification. I mean, we've made a conscious decision to say we don't want that to happen.
Jason? I didn't talk about Mount Carmel enough?
I'm just happy you weren't staring at me when you said editorial comments, Carrie. Jason Como, Mount Carmel Health System. I think the slogan there for the 40th 40 forward for the CMC reminded me of a couple of things. One, I'm turning 40 this year, first and foremost. Second, it's also the 130th anniversary of Mount Carmel's effort to provide care in the place we started at Mount Carmel West and in Franklinton. And I'm joined by a handful of folks at the Mount Carmel table: Sean McKibben, our president of West; Dr. Larry Swanner, vice president of medical affairs there; Amy Peacock, you mentioned in the Healthy Living Center that Trent brought up, and 4 people who are going to be either mad or happy I didn't mention their name. My question is as Mount Carmel moves forward, as Carrie has already reported on, with our transformation process, and you guys have alluded to in trying to bring people together for what's next for our campus in a number of different areas. We see all of the great work that I see, and I hope everybody here learned today, the great work that you guys are doing, the panelists, folks like Jim Sweeney, Franklinton Rising, and others in the community. There's a lot of great things happening in a lot of places, both on the east and the west side of Franklinton. My question is, how can we help bring everyone together to continue that so that we don't lose any of the momentum that's already been started, or that sort of slight disruption, but make it for the positive? I think there's a question in there.
Yeah, Jason, Mount Carmel is already taking steps to do that. The largest transformative change or disruption in West Franklinton being the transition of the Mount Carmel West Hospital, and all the dialogue that is starting to begin about how everyone can be involved in transforming the vision of that campus to better suit the needs of Franklinton. So it's really important.
I think just continuing to have conversations that are inclusive of stakeholders in the community, as well as true, indigenous residents of the community, is what will allow that to continue on a positive and forward trajectory.
And I encourage anyone to come to a Franklinton Area Commission meeting. That's a very engaged group of people. We're all very concerned about making the right decisions for the neighborhood. And I think that's probably the primary way, in my mind, to keep that conversation current and relevant, and keeping people informed, is come to those meetings. I mean, if you want to complain, come complain, and we'll listen to it.
And lastly, I will let everybody know that Trent Smith will make good on his promise of the West Franklinton beer. I've been there.
Yeah, so I still owe you one. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Kaufman. I'm a resident and community organizer. I have the privilege of working with all of you very closely throughout the years, and appreciate your comments today. I think a point that came up throughout the panel discussion was that there's a distinction now being made in our community between West Franklinton and East Franklinton. Much of the narrative that's being told in the city about Franklinton seems to center on the development that's occurring in East Franklinton, describes the community as a hip and up-and-coming place to be, and really in the process does a tremendous disservice to the people of that neighborhood who don't live in that corner of the community and who are not really being impacted greatly by that kind of activity that's going on there. So my question for you is, how can we reconsider the story that's being told about Franklinton and the activity that's taking place there, so that we can truly consider the people of that neighborhood, its history, and the kind of inclusive community that we're trying to create?
Can I go first? I think, in my opinion, it is maybe there haven't been all the same dollars or the same economic energy in West Franklinton, but even longer, in my opinion, in West Franklinton, there have been many truly great things happening through nonprofit organizations, through the faith community, through just things that are going on. And so I think, in my opinion, it is actually merging those stories and making that merged story louder than the current East Franklinton story by itself.
I would agree with that. There were a lot of people that weren't exactly thrilled about the names, East Franklinton versus West Franklinton, but it's not a versus. There are two separate stories to be told about those neighborhoods, and Carrie kind of alluded to it. That there just wasn't that much happening in East Franklinton, so it was almost like a blank canvas to come in and do those types of things that have already happened there. But I think that as that develops, and the more we talk about West Franklinton, that my hope is that eventually the conversation is just about Franklinton. And I think that it was a good business decision initially to call it East Franklinton, because it allowed people to have that perception in their minds that this is a fresh new thing that we're going to go to here, and therefore it's not dangerous and I shouldn't be worried about it. And I would tell you that West Franklinton isn't nearly as dangerous as what people might think, what the perception is. I think the perception is way worse than the reality. But I got why they did it. I understood it. It's been successful. And now we just need to, like Dana said, merge that conversation and just talk about Franklinton.
Hi, Jim Coe from WCBE NPR. You've mentioned more than once about the perceived barrier of 315 as far as impeding commercial and other development. Has any consideration been given to starting at the other end on the west side and moving the development eastwards, for instance, the intersection of Broad and Central, so that, I mean, it seems like the vast majority of acreage and the vast majority of households are on that side of 315 anyway, and there's already some commercial existence for a long time there at Broad and Central.
Yeah, I would like to see that happen at a more rapid pace. And what I can tell you is that, for example, the Franklinton Square Shopping Center just got a brand new paint job. They redid the parking lot last year. Some of the members that are members of the Board of Trade have been doing some renovations of the exteriors of their buildings. Some buildings down at in the 1300 block have just recently been purchased with plans to do some pretty cool things to them. I don't have enough detail to really describe what that's going to be yet, but certainly I know the folks that have made the purchases, and we're working with them. We have opportunity to bring grant dollars to bear. Not a ton of money, but just enough to be an incentive to get people to go ahead and renovate their buildings on the interior and exterior. And we're able to use the Neighborhood Design Center to be able to do free architectural work for those types of considerations. So I would tell you that I think that over the course of 2016, you're going to see development starting at that end of Broad and closing the gap, kind of the middle where Tommy's and the Florentine are. I think you're going to see it coming from the west towards the east. I'm an optimist, but I think that that's something you're going to see in 2016.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Samantha Delosier. I'm with Home Care Assistance. I've worked with a lot of elderly in Franklinton, and as you've said, a lot of them have been in deplorable situations that they were living in, and a lot of them had like their grandkids and even their kids living with them at the same time, with their money situations not where it needs to be. Everyone's pretty much condensed into one whole household with multiple generations. My question for you guys is, how can we get the community itself to pull together in order to help them help themselves, to strengthen their community, and even include some recreational, not just activities, but places people can go to burn out some of their extra energy, or give them hope and something to look forward to in their community, rather than just dwelling on their situations that they're in.
So incrementally, I believe some of that has been occurring and will continue to occur. The health center, for example, really was a grassroots, the community deciding to help itself create accessible and sustainable, affordable health care. And you know, it started small but has grown across the years, and it still is a community initiative, and it's patients and community residents who basically have the controlling interest, so to speak, on the board. So I think that more and more that will continue to occur.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we have an asset called Dodge Park that is terribly underutilized, and I think that the more we can bring that online for residents to take advantage of and get more programming there, that's going to be a great thing. And then the congregations. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful congregations within Franklinton that try that type of outreach. And as a matter of fact, I recently had conversations with one group that has this very idea in mind of somehow being able to get volunteers to assist with home repairs for the elderly and things of that nature. So those are all conversations that we've had, and just, you know, a matter of kind of getting it to a point of making it work.
Franklinton has really strong social capital networks. Families are big, they're deep, they span Franklinton, the Hilltop, South Side. I mean, there's a really strong urban Appalachian component, so a lot of stretch down into Kentucky, Southern Ohio. But information is disseminated largely by word of mouth. Social media, you know, online sort of information dissemination doesn't work very well within our neighborhood. So getting more on the ground voice is a big thing. That's something that Franklinton Gardens is going to be working on with an AmeriCorps Vista program this coming year. There's a lot of door-to-door engagement about the programming that exists within Franklinton.
Jim Sweeney, take us home.
I'll wrap us up.
This will be a hard question, I'm sure.
I've tried to think of a hard question, and you guys have covered so much ground. I'm Jim Sweeney, Director of the Franklinton Development Association. Thanks to the Metropolitan Club for featuring our neighborhood today. It's been a great discussion. Thanks for all three of you for doing this. I underscored that all three people on the panel are residents of Franklinton, have been for several years. Trent Smith bought a house from the Franklinton Development Association. We're very proud of that. I just want to underscore the interesting points that were made about the name. East Franklinton, West Franklinton. One word I haven't heard today is the bottoms. When I first started when I first joined FDA, which has been around since '93, when I joined as director in 2002, I suggested that the Bottoms was kind of a cool name. Why don't we embrace that? You know, what other neighborhood in town has a "the" in its name? And I had about 3 people jump down my throat. And we don't call it the Bottoms anymore. And by the way, East Franklinton, the first time I heard of it was when I read the 2003 Franklinton plan that designated the area east of 315 as a special development district because its character is so different than the West. I asked Bruce Warner, who knows everything about Franklinton, when he first heard of East Franklinton, he said when they built 315 through the neighborhood, clipping off that part of the neighborhood. So I'm a little sensitive to this notion that somehow we concocted East Franklinton as a way to split it from the rest of the neighborhood. That's not the case at all. We're just celebrating the opportunities that exist on that side that are different than the other side. And we try to, as Trent very artfully put, we try to leverage the strength of one side and drive investment to the other side where it can do the best social good. And we're really excited to be a part of a great team of nonprofits. And I know, Carrie, you asked us not to make speeches, and that's what I'm doing here. But honestly, couldn't come up with a question. But I just wanted to point those things out.
The answer is yes.
Thank you.
What a phenomenal way to end a wonderful forum. I hope that you all enjoyed today's discussion. We encourage you to continue the conversation in the lobby with coffee and cookies. You can view and share today's forum and all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Let's thank our sponsors, Regionomics, and our speakers, Dana Vallangeon, Nick Stanich, Trent Smith, and Carrie Ghose. And a special thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you at CMC again soon. Have a great afternoon.